A little bit of a different analysis video. A former five-star defensive lineman, Antonio Alfano, signs a financial aid agreement with Colorado on Monday. They're able to announce it because he has signed that. It does bind CU to him. Doesn't necessarily bind Alfano to CU. We saw that with the whole Davis Webb saga. But generally, when you go ahead and sign that financial aid agreement, you're going to end up on campus. The Webb was kind of an isolated saga here at CU.
Yeah, that was one that, I think that, had Sefo Lufau been struggling with his rehab from that foot injury, you probably would have seen Davis Webb here, but that was one that he could see that Sefo was coming along and let's move on somewhere else. Where this is a much different situation with Antonio, where he can come in right away. He knows there's nobody that's going to. I'm going to say there's nobody that can take his job. He can come in here right away. There's a spot for him, and he can get in this rotation and really kind of be a leader in this rotation potentially.
Yeah. One of the biggest criticisms we had, and justifiably so with the McIntyre era, was their lack of ability to recruit quality defensive linemen. They did bring Israel Antwine in, Terrence Lang, and a couple good JUCO defensive linemen. But that was over a long period of time where they had a lot of misses there. Mel Tucker said he came in December 5th. First thing he saw was both lines have to be bigger, more explosive. And this shows that they have put an emphasis on that, and it's obviously a huge get for them in that sense.
Well, you look at who's playing right now, and Mustafa and Jalen Sammy and Terrence Lang are the starters, and they were McIntyre recruits. But a big part of this rotation right now are guys that have that were brought here by Tucker since December. And Austin Williams, Naeem Rodman, Janaz Jordan, Jeremiah Dawson been playing. So, yeah, he's emphasized that quite a bit. This shows more of a commitment to that where, this is one of the top kids in the country potentially that, if he comes in here focused, he could potentially be a real game changer for the Buffs.
And it's funny, too, they get a commitment from a junior college defensive lineman named Julius Coates recently. Yeah. At that time, you didn't have any other power conference offers. And there's a few CU fans that are always going to grumble about that when that's not the case. And just yesterday, he picked up 3. Yeah. So that just shows that they have a good eye going out to the junior college ranks. Back to Alfano, he was number 1 overall on 24/7 Sports. Colorado has had some other 5-star guys. Marcus Houston in 2000 was ranked number 1 among running backs, 5th nationally. Yeah. Darrell Scott, same, 1st at his position, 5th nationally. Ryan Miller was the other 5-star that they've signed back in 2007. Ryan Miller had a pretty good career, bounced around the NFL for a while. Those other 2 guys were busts, obviously. So you hope the hype is real here with Alfano coming in.
Well, those other 2 guys end up at other schools as well. One thing as you're mentioning that list, I was thinking, boy, there's not a whole lot of those guys. And it's been a while since there's been one. And Colorado's not really a program that's going to get a lot of 5-star type of kids. But is this the type of kid that can maybe turn the tide in that regard? We'll see. The Buffs have got to win games. But this is one that clearly there was a connection there. And you hope that Alfano, especially now that he's already transferred, that he stays here and can really make an impact here. Because if he's as good as advertised, he can be a guy that not only makes an impact on the field, but maybe brings some more recruits here.
Yeah, you talk to people that evaluated him as a high school recruit, and he was as close to a can't miss as possible. We've heard different rumors about what happened at Alabama. His father tweeted out that it was when his grandmother fell ill, who he was really close to. That's when he stopped attending classes. I don't know any of this, but Mel Tucker did say at his press conference today that he had a long conversation with Antonio, and it seems like he's 100% on board with his vision for his future here at CU.
Well, and hey, one of Mel Tucker's biggest mentors throughout his career has been Nick Saban, and I'm guessing that he had a conversation too with Nick Saban as well, and maybe vetted things that way. I don't know. He wasn't asked that, but I have to think as much as Mel Tucker has mentioned Nick Saban and really kind of revered him as a mentor, you've got to think that was part of it as well. And if Saban gave him any red flags that Antonio may not be here, but I'm always speculating that he talked to Saban, but I think it's a good bet that happened, and so I trust Tucker in that regard, and that maybe he went through those channels, and hey, even if he had some issues down in Alabama, I think a lot of kids deserve a second chance. It doesn't sound like nothing you've heard or I've heard is enough that the kid doesn't deserve a second chance, and so hopefully he comes in here and makes the most of it.
I mean, most of us were not fully matured when we were that age, right? You're going to make some mistakes, and if he learns from whatever happened at Alabama and takes that going forward, it could be a great lesson for him. He did have 2 sacks in Alabama spring game, so it's not like he went out there and didn't live up to the hype on any level.
Right.
You know, he made some plays there. You look at him coming in here in January, if he can get that waiver to play immediately, and we've seen some guys seemingly for no reason get granted that waiver. So part of me would be surprised if he's not eligible to play with them in 2020. You put him, if Mustafa Johnson comes back, with Jalen Sammy, Terrence Lang has improved. You mentioned all those guys that Tucker staff has brought in. Those guys have gotten experience this year. All of a sudden, kind of like cornerback we talked about yesterday, all of a sudden the defensive line, you got to see them prove it that it's a strength on game day, but all of a sudden that's a pretty deep group.
And you mentioned Julius Coates and other defensive linemen they're going to bring in here, and chat with Jimmy Brumbaugh. After practice, said there's other guys coming too. So they're not done recruiting defensive line just because on paper they don't lose anybody and they're adding a couple guys. They want to really build some strength there. But you're right. I mean, that defensive line group. You look at it right now, you're like, okay, this could be kind of a special group. I mean, I've said all along, I kind of like the starting group of Sammy and Lang and Mustafa. But now, if you bring in a guy like Antonio, that if he can play next year, one of those 3 guys is not going to be a starter. That's a pretty impressive group. And I don't think the way they rotate it matters so much if you're a starter. They're going to rotate guys. But, you look at a potential, Terrence Lang or Mustafa Johnson not even being in the starting lineup, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, wow, we've got something here. And if they can get 8, 9 guys, and Austin Williams gaining experience, Naeem Rodman gaining experience, they might look pretty good next year.
And as Mel Tucker was asked about and commented on, with recruiting, momentum can be huge. They do have 18 verbal commitments. They have got a huge recruiting weekend coming up this week against Stanford. Players, really talented players, want to play with other talented players. And sometimes a quarterback can be really talented, scare off other recruits because there's only going to be one that plays at a time. But this could be something that kind of generates some momentum for them leading up to that December 18th signing period.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a high school linebacker right now, you look at this guy going up there and say, okay, I might be able to play behind a line like this for a few years. That might be kind of fun. It could have a trickle-down effect. It'll be interesting to see what happens between now and December 20th or even that February signing period to see if there's any impact.
Obviously a losing streak right now, but a huge recruiting win for the Buffaloes. We'll be back to talk about Stanford later this week.